YouTube, today we got to talk about why Apple needs Samsung to survive and vice versa. It's funny because these two companies are doing a lot of business together. They're practically business partners, but what's funny is that in the tech community, there's a lot of loyalty to either side and they're always throwing jabs at the other side. Samsung fans are always saying, well, Apple got their displays from Samsung. Well, Samsung manufactures their displays, meaning that Apple designed it and Samsung just produces them. Manufacturing is a different thing, but Apple fans may not understand that there are a lot of key components within this device that are from Samsung that are extremely important to the iPhone and its production. And also, these companies have been going back and forth, lawsuit after lawsuit, and honestly, Samsung lost their lawsuit because they stole the design of the iPhone. All of the details about all of this and more in this video, so let's lock in. Samsung is one of the largest manufacturers in the mobile game, producing products for companies to the likes of Apple, Sony, Nokia, and plenty more. Samsung has the manufacturing game and the mobile game on lock. Now, this manufacturing consists of semiconductors, displays, processors, lithium-ion batteries, camera modules, image sensors, and displays. Now, with Samsung having such a huge footprint in the manufacturing game, they're able to use the revenue from that to venture into their own market of retail smartphone manufacturing. I mean, once you make all of these components for every other company, the only thing that's left is to come up with a design. And when Samsung came up with their design initially, they stole from Apple. They literally stole the design of the iPhone. As you guys can see on the screen right here, this is a blatant infringement of copyright, and Apple actually won that lawsuit. Now, we're talking about big numbers and big lawsuits. So the next time a Samsung person is talking about how innovative Samsung is, just remember, Samsung has always stolen and gotten a ton of cues from Apple, and vice versa, to be fair. But just remember that they stole the iPhone's design. All right, and as far as that lawsuit goes, as you can see, Apple and Samsung are two of the world's largest smartphone manufacturers and market leaders. In early December, Samsung finally agreed to pay Apple a sum of $548 million. Now, let me explain something. That wasn't the original payment cost. You can see it clearly right here. As a result of the 2012 verdict, Samsung was initially ordered to pay $930 million, almost $1 billion, to Apple, which was reduced to $382 million by an appeals court, resulting in about $548 million remaining due for the payment by Samsung, which finally got settled a few days back. Now listen, the irony is these two have been going to court back and forth for years. And I think that's part of the reason why you see Samsung making these, commercial ads, taking jabs at Apple. But the funny thing is at Samsung, they have a code name for Apple. It's LO, L-O, which stands for loyal opponent. So I think there's a sense of respect and honor between the two because they do a lot of business together. Let's get into that side now. As you can see right here, it says the relationship between Apple and Samsung is not just that of rivals in the marketplace or restricted to lawsuits. The two companies, in fact, work as supply chain partners and are important for each other. And here's another key thing about it. Thus, despite battles in courtrooms and media, they remain significant for each other for business. In fact, Apple and Samsung have managed to keep their business relationship insulated from the bitter rivalry that exists between them. And right here, you guys can see what I spoke about earlier. Samsung and Apple have been in a business relationship since the year 2008. And since then, Apple has been one of Samsung's biggest clients. So much so that company employees have created a code word, LO, for Apple, which translates to lovely opponent. I said it wrong. I said loyal. Lovely opponent. So that's interesting. They consider them a lovely opponent. That's actually respect and love. Yo, shout out to Samsung and Apple. But let's get more into this relationship and why Apple depends on Samsung so much and why Samsung in returns depends on Apple. So Samsung and their manufacturing is such a big deal that they built a massive new factory in 2017 just to accommodate all of the manufacturing that they're doing for all of these companies. The purpose of the new factory is to ramp up production rates and to satisfy the demand for more sophisticated computer chips and computer components. In order to sustain its position as the #1 computer component manufacturer in the world, Samsung requires a steady stream of income. Thus, Samsung needs the purchasing capability of Apple to remain consistent on a yearly basis. This is where Samsung depends on Apple financially because Apple is a large customer and client of theirs. Apple is spending big bucks with Samsung to have them manufacture massive amounts of computer components, which is, the DRAM for the iPhone, the NAND chips for the iPhone, and the displays. And those items are huge in the production of the iPhone. At this point, Apple doesn't manufacture anything. Their iPhones are put together by a third-party company, and they just source all of the parts from so many different companies. They're getting the chips from the TSMC company and so on. And then they just have it put together. But the thing that Apple does well at is marketing and design. Apple has been very consistent in their design element, and they've brought a very nice, sleek product to the marketplace year after year. Regardless if you love it or hate it, nevertheless, you cannot deny that Apple has one of the best, if not the best smartphone designs in the game. So much so that Samsung tried to steal it in the beginning. So let's continue on. Samsung is a major supplier to these firms, but their competitive advantage is the ability to scale its production in order to produce cheaper products. Like the more you make, the cheaper it gets. However, Apple continues to lead the pack in terms of sales of smartphones and tablets because it focuses its attention on its competitive advantage over other manufacturers. In other words, Apple focuses on the creation of products with elegant design and powerful software that are compatible with the overall design of the product. They're putting it together well. And I think that's where iPhones just kind of have a slight edge over the rest of the smartphone competitors, is because it's just well put together and it just works. Now, peep this. Apple wants to get from under the footprint of Samsung, but Samsung is just so good at what they do. They've been doing it so well for so long. Ever since the first iPhone, Samsung has been a part of it. And in all of these years, Apple has yet to, find a supplier other than Samsung that's just as good. Carry on. Apple announced the production of new products that are more sophisticated and promises to address other needs. This means that Apple needs more powerful components. In its desire to reduce its dependence on Samsung, Apple attempts to look for other suppliers. However, the company learns soon enough that Samsung makes the best computer chips in the world. Not just the city, the world, Craig. Now, peep this. This is a key thing, too. With regard to the current business environment wherein Apple buys components from Samsung, the company will be hard-pressed to advertise its phones as having better hardware than its competitors in the context of brand positioning. Apple will strive to appeal to consumers' perception. By doing so, Apple negates the superior position of Samsung in terms of hardware. Thus, even if the core components and hardware facet of the phones are similar, the consumer will always find iPhones is more appealing. Interesting. This is the reason why there are so many consumers all over the world that are still loyal to Apple, even if it's obvious that Samsung produces phones that are more powerful and efficient. I don't know about efficient, but now Samsung is listen, to me it's Apple, Samsung, strong second, and then I feel like Google's coming up. Now, there are other manufacturers out there in the other side of the world, and their devices are slowly, being introduced to this market and maybe being sold natively eventually. But until then, those are the big three out here in the States. So what have we established so far? Apple is Samsung's largest customer in the manufacturing world. They depend on Apple's invoice every year and their contract to manufacture for the iPhone. And let me just clarify this. Samsung manufactures for Apple. Apple designs everything that's being made for the iPhone. Samsung just manufactures. Now, granted, I think when it comes to the RAM chips and the NAND chips, those are just Samsung's, that's what they do. But, in terms of display, Apple had the highest rated display on the last couple of iPhones. The iPhone 14 Pro Max and 13 Pro Max were rated best displays. And you will always see in the comment section from Samsung fans, well, Samsung makes their displays. How could Samsung give Apple a better display than themselves. That's because Apple designed it. The only thing Samsung did was manufacture it because they have the plant and the resources to produce design components at scale in mass quantities. That's all that it is. So it's Apple's design, Apple's genius, Apple's engineers that created said display, and Samsung just produces it massively so that they can put it in every single iPhone. Get it? And this is where it gets interesting because it's rumored that Apple's looking to manufacture its own displays. That would cut Samsung out on that portion of manufacturing, and that would be a huge hit to Samsung's financials. Remember, Samsung is making money by manufacturing for all of these big players in the game. They're able to take from that and fund their mobile ventures. Would Apple shifting to their own manufacturing cripple Samsung? That's where you see the reality that Samsung relies on Apple heavily because Apple produces cash flow for Samsung. And Samsung manufactures that said products that gives Apple that revenue and cash. Well, Apple got mad cash. I don't even know if they got to sell an iPhone to be able to go to whatever manufacturer or build whatever they want to do because their cash is heavy. But at the end of the day, it's easier to roll with the player that already has it on lock. I mean, Samsung already has the manufacturing facility. It's already a well-oiled machine. Why not? For Apple to do their own thing, it would just take a lot more of growing pains. But nevertheless, it's not out of the question. They switched to their own ARM chips and they're winning. So they got Intel out of the picture. If they get Samsung out of the picture, more revenue for Apple, less revenue for Samsung. Where does that leave Samsung? Now, peek this note to further the argument and the reality. Unlike its rivals, Samsung has not imposed production cuts in response to sluggish NAND flash market demand, likely partly due to its entry into the Apple supply chain. The fact that Apple is still rolling strong, they are able to maintain their NAND flash memory production at the same rate because Apple's still slanging iPhones. Moreover, the Korean manufacturer is thought to be able to afford quote cuts and output increases, which has further strengthened its competitiveness. See, Samsung is a strong player in the manufacturing world. Even if on the retail smartphone market side, their numbers have been kind of up and down and shaky, but at the end of the day, they're still the big player in the mobile market. They got the #1 spot as a whole for 2022. Apple took the edge in Q4, but Samsung still held it down, but they're able to manufacture and pump out so many products, so many different SKUs because they control the manufacturing. But I still have the question, if Apple left Samsung for manufacturing and no longer brought the, invoice and the huge orders for the iPhone, will Samsung still be able to fund their smartphone market the same? How much revenue would Samsung lose exactly? But in the same note, how much revenue would Apple gain? And would this shift the smartphone market as we know it? So with that being said, major shout out to Apple, major shout out to Samsung. I respect both of these brands. I use both of their products. But at the end of the day, they rely on each other to survive. All right. Are you team Samsung or team Apple? Hit the comment section. Go, go, go.